The words hit me like a physical blow, knocking the air from my lungs. I've changed my mind. I will marry Kaylin Vance after all. I stared at my older sister, Serafina, her beautiful face set in a mask of resolute determination. Just moments ago she had been sobbing, begging our parents not to force her into a union with a crippled man. Now she stood beside his wheelchair, her chin held high. A cold dread, sharp and familiar, trickled down my spine. This sudden, inexplicable shift, it wasn't right. It wasn't her. And then my eyes met hers and I saw it. A flicker of ancient knowledge, a cunning that hadn't been there before. I understood in a terrifying, gut-wrenching instant. Serafina, like me, had been reborn. Memories of my death, cold and suffocating, flooded my mind. In our previous life, Kaylin, a decorated military captain, was left paralyzed after a mission gone wrong. When news reached us, Serafina, his fiancée, refused outright. She wouldn't hear another word about it. Our parents, who had always worshipped her, turned to me, the forgotten daughter raised by our grandfather. They forced me to take her place. After I married him, it took me less than 6 months to cure Kaylin's paralysis. It wasn't a miracle. It was relentless, hidden work. Once he recovered, his health restored and his career skyrocketing, Serafina, who had been secretly involved with a local thug and gotten pregnant, became consumed with bitter resentment. She left behind a suicide note accusing me of stealing her engagement, then jumped into a river and killed herself. After Serafina died, Kaylin didn't act any differently than usual. But when I was 8 months pregnant, he cruelly pushed me into the same river. As I struggled in the freezing water, he looked at me with icy contempt. "This is all your fault, Elara," he'd said, his voice devoid of all warmth. "If you hadn't schemed to break Serafina and me apart, she wouldn't have died. You brought this on yourself." I couldn't swim. My baby and I died tragically in that icy darkness. When I opened my eyes again, I was back here. In the past. The voice that had pulled me from the abyss of memory was all too familiar. "I want to marry Kaylin Vance right now," Serafina declared. "But I have a condition. I want the box of grandfather's miracle pills that my sister has." That voice made me turn my head. I saw Serafina standing next to Kaylin, who was once again sitting in a wheelchair, looking determined as if she wouldn't take no for an answer. "Sister," she said, her tone dripping with false sweetness, "I know the pills grandfather left can heal Kaylin's legs. Please, I'm begging you. Give them to me. If he takes them, he'll be able to walk again." I stared blankly at Serafina, alive and well. Then I looked at Kaylin, whose legs were still paralyzed. What was happening? Wasn't Serafina already dead? How was I looking at a version of her that was several years younger? And Kaylin, hadn't I already cured him? Why was he still sitting in a wheelchair? Then I turned and saw our parents, younger and wearing unfriendly expressions, and recognized every familiar item in the room. In that moment I realized something terrifying and miraculous. I had been reborn. I had returned to the moment before I was forced to marry Kaylin in Serafina's place. In the previous life, when Kaylin was injured, Serafina immediately regretted the engagement. She absolutely refused to marry a disabled man. Our parents adored her for her wit and eloquence, so when she refused, they turned to me, the daughter they never cared for, to take her place. Kaylin, dumped by the woman he loved, became aggressive and hostile. He refused medicine and treatment, completely resigned to dying. So on the first day of our marriage, when I saw his miserable state, I told him a well-meaning lie. I said grandfather had left behind a box of miracle pills that could heal him if he took them for 81 days. He didn't fully believe me, but he had no choice. A paralyzed soldier was bound to be discharged, and my late grandfather had been a renowned healer. So with suspicion in his heart, Kaylin began taking the pills I gave him every day. In reality, the pills were nothing but honey-coated herbal sleep aids. Every night after he fell into a deep sleep, I would take out my silver needles and perform acupuncture on him, following the techniques grandfather had passed down to me. 4 hours each night I worked on his blocked meridians, treating him silently while he slept. The reason Kaylin could walk again wasn't because of a miracle cure. It was my skill. Now both Serafina and Kaylin were staring at me, waiting for my response. Serafina grabbed my wrist tightly, her fingernails digging into my flesh. "Elara, you're not going to say no to your sister, right?" she pressed. "We're family. Our bond is in our blood. If you help me, I'll be grateful for the rest of my life." Seeing their precious daughter kneeling, my biased parents immediately jumped to her defense. "Elara, you have grandfather's pills," my mother snapped. "Why won't you give them to your sister to help Kaylin? What is wrong with you?" My father pointed a trembling finger at me, his face red with fury. "You shameless brat. Hand over those pills to your sister right now. Don't you care if Kaylin lives or dies?" I looked at their cold, unfeeling faces, the people who had condemned me to death in another life, and felt a glacial calm settle over me. "Do you seriously think grandfather left me any miracle pills?" I asked slowly and clearly. "Don't you remember? He died in an accident on his way to treat a patient. I never even got to see him one last time. How could he have left me a miracle cure?" My direct question made my parents exchange a quick, guilty glance. Deep down, they both knew perfectly well there had never been any miracle medicine. But Lucas cut in, his voice cold and sure from his wheelchair. "I don't like you, Elara. Not even a little. Don't think you can use some miracle pills to force me to marry you. I'd rather stay paralyzed for life than ever give in to you. Give it up." As soon as those words left his mouth, Serafina dropped to her knees again with a loud thud. "Elara, I'm begging you. As your sister, I'm begging you. Please give me grandfather's pills. If they can help Kaylin walk again, I'll do anything for you. I'll serve you for the rest of my life." Looking at the two shameless people in front of me, both desperately begging for pills that didn't exist, I was absolutely certain. These two scumbags had returned to this life just like I had. And they were about to learn that some second chances are meant for punishment, not for redemption. The air in the room was thick with tension and greed. I could almost taste it. Serafina's desperate ambition, Kaylin's entitled fury, my parents' blind devotion to their favorite child. They were all convinced I held the key to a future of power and luxury, a key that was nothing but a phantom. "Maybe she's hiding them," Serafina insisted, her voice shrill. "Elara's always been sneaky and manipulative. Of course she wouldn't tell you about something so important." Hearing both her and Kaylin speak with such certainty, my parents' doubt evaporated. They turned on me again, their faces contorted with a familiar cruelty. "If you don't give them up, don't blame us for being ruthless," my father threatened. After living 2 lifetimes, their coldness couldn't touch me anymore. My voice was like ice. "What are you planning to do to your own daughter? If you don't listen, we'll beat you to death," my mother snapped. "And if that doesn't work, we'll marry you off to that old widower in the village." The threat was a chilling echo of my past life. When I had refused to marry Kaylin then, they'd said the exact same words. To them, Serafina was their precious jewel, while I, raised by grandfather, was worth less than a dog in their eyes. Their words finally severed the last fragile thread of familial loyalty I might have foolishly clung to. This time I would get justice. I yanked my arm away from Serafina's grip, her nails leaving red half-moons on my skin. My gaze shifted to Kaylin, who was trying so hard to pretend he didn't want the pills, yet staring at me like a starving man eyeing a feast. I sneered. "Didn't you say you'd rather die than take my pills, Captain Vance? I thought you were a hero. So in honor of your great nobility, I won't be handing them over. I hope you'll stay true to your word and spend the rest of your life happily ever after with my sister." A flicker of pure panic crossed Kaylin's face. He realized I wouldn't be manipulated, and that meant his future of glory was slipping away. Serafina, that greedy, heartless woman, was furious too. I knew that at this point she was still entangled with her thug. She didn't want a paralyzed husband. She wanted the general's wife lifestyle she knew he would provide. She burst into theatrical tears, crying and screaming that I was evil and despicable, that I couldn't stand to see her happy. I watched her performance with cold indifference. When they saw I wouldn't bend, Kaylin finally dropped the act. Still in his wheelchair, he had the unbelievable arrogance to assume my resistance was rooted in affection. "Elara," he said, his tone haughty, "the real reason you won't give up the pills is because you still have feelings for me. Isn't it? Let me make it clear. I'd rather stay paralyzed for life than ever leave Serafina. I'd rather die than marry you." A cold, sharp laugh escaped me. "You really think too highly of yourself. You're just a half-paralyzed cripple. What makes you think I'd want to marry someone like you?" The insult landed like a slap. In my last life, I had always tiptoed around his fragile ego. Now, hearing me call him a cripple to his face, he was completely stunned, disbelief written all over his features. I met his gaze with nothing but pure disgust. Panic began to truly set in for him. He wanted to walk again so badly. Seeing no other option, he turned to my parents. This house isn't that big. If those pills are so important, she's definitely keeping them in her room somewhere. It was all the permission they needed. The three of them exchanged a glance and sprang into action. If I wouldn't give the pills willingly, they'd just take them by force. They stormed into my room like a tornado. I stood back and watched, my arms crossed as they tore my sanctuary apart. Pillows were ripped open, drawers were upended, cabinets were emptied, and they even pulled up floorboards like they were digging for buried treasure. 4, 5, 6 frantic hours, they searched every inch of the place, their movements growing increasingly desperate. In the end, they found nothing. Not a trace of the so-called miracle pills. The four of them stood amidst the wreckage of my room, dumbfounded and utterly defeated. My parents, heartbroken for Serafina, were furious and humiliated. They turned on me again, shouting, "Are you going to hand over the pills or not? If you keep this up, don't blame us if we beat you to death." Kaylin joined in, trying to leverage a threat. "Alara, if you give us the pills willingly, I promise no one will hurt you. But if you keep being stubborn and your parents take action, I won't stop them." Getting beaten in this house was nothing new to me. In my past life, I internalized the pain, thinking I deserved it. But after dying once, I knew the truth. Their hatred had nothing to do with me, it was simply favoritism. My eyes moved slowly from my parents to Kaylin, this ungrateful, shameless scum of a man. I looked him dead in the eye. Word by word, I said, my voice low and steady, "If they lay even a finger on me, the pills will be destroyed. And Kaylin Vance will never walk again." The threat worked. After tearing my room apart and finding nothing, he knew he had no leverage. He didn't dare push me too far. Left with no other option, Kaylin, Serafina, and my parents left in a frustrated huddle to discuss their next move. What they didn't realize was that no matter how long they planned, they would never find pills that didn't exist. I sat alone in my ransacked room, surrounded by the debris of my old life, and quietly began to plan my revenge. In my past life, they had forced me, slandered me, and hurt me mercilessly. This time I would never let it slide. I would make every last one of them pay. Kaylin wouldn't give up. I knew that. So I decided I'd give him something else entirely. A specially prepared box of medicine that would leave him with a fate worse than paralysis. Over the next week, I stayed in my room, ostensibly studying grandfather's old notes. In reality, I was concocting 2 sets of pills. One was completely harmless, just ordinary herbal placebos. The other was something else entirely. A special blend designed to destroy a man's vitality and render him permanently impotent. Meanwhile, Kaylin kept showing up at our house, conspiring with Serafina. I knew they wouldn't give up. He was obsessed with walking again, she was obsessed with the wealth and status he would bring. They wouldn't stop coming after me. And sure enough, their plan unfolded. One night, as I was walking home alone from a late shift, 3 or 4 thugs materialized from the shadows of an alley, blocking my path. They closed in with sleazy smiles, cutting off any escape. The leader held a knife. "Hand over the miracle pills," he demanded. "We'll let you go if you cooperate. Otherwise, we'll have our fun with you before we kill you." As he spoke, he reached out to grab me. But the moment his grimy hand touched my wrist, he let out a shrill scream of pain. I had stabbed a pressure point in his arm with a silver acupuncture needle hidden in my sleeve. He gripped his arm in agony. Seizing the chance, I broke through their circle and bolted down the alley. "What are you waiting for? Don't let her get away," the wounded thug screamed. Footsteps pounded behind me. I ran for my life, my heart hammering against my ribs, shouting for help. I was desperate for anyone to hear me. Just as I burst out of the alley onto the main road, a military jeep pulled up. It screeched to a halt as the driver saw me, a frantic young woman being chased. I was saved. The men in the jeep, all military police, jumped out and quickly apprehended the thugs. The door of the jeep opened, and the man who had saved me was revealed. My breath caught in my throat. It was General Silas Thorne, the youngest major general in the military district. He was a living legend, an 18-year-old recruit who had racked up achievement after achievement, becoming a major general before he even turned 30. But just like Kaylin in the past, he had injured his leg during a mission and was confined to a wheelchair. In my previous life, this promising hero had died young in a car accident on a rainy night, on his way to a meeting. He wasn't even 30. And I realized with a start, today was the day it was supposed to happen. I wanted to see if I could change his fate with the second chance I'd been given. Silas had saved me. Because of the altercation, he didn't follow his original route to the meeting. Instead, he took me and the thugs straight to the police station. There, the thugs were interrogated and quickly confessed. They didn't name their employer. Instead, they claimed someone in their family was ill and they'd heard I had miracle pills that could cure any disease. They said they just wanted the medicine to save a life. Seated in his wheelchair, General Thorne gave a cold, sarcastic chuckle. The thugs, visibly nervous under his piercing gaze, still insisted. We're telling the truth. Alara really does have miracle pills. Her grandfather was a famous healer. He left behind medicine that can cure anything. Absolutely anything. Silas turned to me, his expression unreadable. Is that true? I met his eyes calmly, my heart still racing from the chase but my voice steady. I don't have any miracle pills that can cure everything. But my grandfather passed on his medical skills to me. I took a breath, plunging ahead. If it's your leg, I might be able to take a look. He raised an eyebrow, clearly skeptical. You. I can try, I said steadily. At least let me try. Sometimes a dying horse can still be saved. Maybe I can help with your leg. A faint, almost imperceptible smile touched his lips. You're comparing me to a horse now? Of course not, I replied, emboldened by his lack of immediate dismissal. I just want to offer you a chance. Let me treat you. Honestly, his gaze was so sharp it made my heart race anew. I was scared but I pushed forward. Not because I was fully confident but because I remembered healing Kaelin. Maybe I could do the same for Silas Thorne. He was a true military hero, completely different from someone despicable like Kaelin Vance. I sincerely wanted to see him stand again. After the police finished their report, Silas had his driver drop me off at home. As I got out of the jeep, he finally spoke. People say young calves aren't afraid of tigers. You're one bold calf. He paused, studying me. I'll give you a chance. 1 week from now I'll come pick you up. News of the thug's arrest reached Kaelin quickly. He hadn't expected his plan to fall apart so fast. When he heard I'd been rescued by General Silas Thorne, he couldn't sit still. In our last life, by this point I had already married him and begun his treatment. But this time he was still paralyzed and it was driving him insane. The knowledge that I was now connected to a man who was his superior in every way filled him with terrified jealousy. Desperate, he came to me himself, his pride finally crumbling. Alara, he said, his voice strained, if you give me the pills to fix my legs, I'll marry you. I couldn't help it. A loud, incredulous laugh burst from me. Why would I want that? Look at yourself. Half a man, half a ghost, and you still think you're some kind of prize? Why would I marry someone like you when I could have a perfectly healthy man? You're in love with me, aren't you? He said, a flicker of his old arrogance returning. I spat on the ground in disgust. Don't say things that'll get you struck by lightning. You're Seraphina's fiancé. You think I'm in love with you? Don't flatter yourself. Even if I were dying, I'd never marry someone like you. His face darkened. Then what will it take for you to give me the medicine? I smiled, a cold, calculated expression. That depends on how sincere you are. I want money. At least 10,000. He gritted his teeth, his jaw tight. 10,000 was a fortune at that time, a sum that would put him in deep debt. Fine, he finally hissed. I'll find the money. When word got out that I'd asked for 10,000, Seraphina and my parents were furious. They scolded me nonstop, calling me heartless, cruel, and ungrateful. I ignored them completely, focused on my work. The pills were almost ready. I ignored their venomous words completely, pouring my focus into grandfather's notes and the 2 sets of pills I was preparing. One box contained simple, harmless herbal placebos. The other held the special recipe, a blend that would ensure Kaelin Vance's body would betray him in the most humiliating way possible, leaving him impotent and incontinent. If he and Seraphina managed to stop themselves, if they showed even a shred of humanity, I was willing to let them go with the harmless pills. But if not, they'd get exactly what they deserved. When the pills were finally ready, Kaelin, after an exhausting effort of begging and borrowing, gathered the full 10,000 and came back. We exchanged on clear terms, cash for the box. I took the thick stack of bills, feeling its weight, the weight of his desperation, and handed him the box containing the placebo pills. He gripped the box like it was a holy relic, his eyes shining with triumphant avarice, and went off to have it verified. He thought he had just purchased his golden ticket back to power. Back in my ransacked room, I quietly stitched the $10,000 into the lining of my old winter coat. It was my ticket out, my security. During that time, Serafina knocked on my door several times, her voice syrupy sweet, saying she had something to talk to me about. I ignored her every time. Their patterns were so predictable, they were already setting their next trap. After securing the money, I placed the second box, the one containing the specially prepared pills, into my black cloth satchel and walked out of the room. Outside, Serafina, my parents, and Kaylin were all waiting, their eyes fixed on me like vultures. Kaylin must have verified the placebo pills by now. After all, he had taken 81 of them in our past life and would recognize the taste instantly. His expression was dark, thunderous. As soon as I stepped out, Serafina pounced. "Where are you going?" I swept my gaze over each of their faces, my expression neutral. "I'm going to the military compound to treat General Thorne." As I spoke, I intentionally shifted my satchel so the box inside peeked out. Both Serafina and Kaylin caught sight of it. Their eyes widened almost imperceptibly. Kaylin's expression darkened further. Serafina's face twisted with naked tension. "Sister," she said, forcing a brittle smile. "Before you go, your big sister and our parents have prepared a little something for you." I glanced from her to my ever-biased parents. Oh, I didn't know my sister and our parents had a gift for me. My parents wouldn't meet my gaze. They looked down and mumbled, "Actually, it wasn't from us. Serafina and Kaylin are getting married soon. They wanted to thank you for everything, so they prepared a special gift." "Thank me?" I thought. "For what? For trying to kill me?" "Well," I said flatly, "thank you in advance." "The gift is custom-made," Serafina added quickly, her smile straining. "You'll need to come with us to get it." Sensing I might not follow willingly, she layered on the false sweetness. "I promise you'll love it." So I followed them. Serafina, Kaylin, and my parents led me out the door. But instead of taking the main road, they led me down a narrow and used back path, winding closer and closer to the same river where in our past lives both Serafina and I had drowned. I stopped walking, my senses screaming. "Why are we going along the river?" I asked, my voice dangerously calm. "Why not take the road?" Serafina stammered, "It's a shortcut." Soon we reached the desolate riverbank. There wasn't a soul around. The only sound was the rush of the water. Suddenly, Kaylin shouted, "Do it!" At his command, my parents lunged forward and grabbed the satchel off my shoulder. Serafina ran up to help. I was no match for the four of them. In no time they had wrestled the bag away. My parents opened it like it was a treasure chest, pulled out the box inside and handed it to Kaylin. "Kaylin, here. We got it," my father said, breathless with triumph. Kaylin opened the box, took out one of the pills and sniffed it. A flicker of confusion crossed his face, then dawning, furious recognition. It didn't smell like the pills from before. He sneered, his face contorting with venom. "I knew it. Alara, you tried to trick me with a fake." He looked up, his eyes burning with hatred. "You've been reborn, haven't you? Just like me and Serafina. You evil, shameless woman. How dare you use medicine to manipulate me? You must really want to die." I stared into his cold eyes, no longer feigning ignorance. "Kaylin Vance," I replied clearly and slowly, "if you don't want to die a miserable death, you better stop now." "You're threatening me?" He laughed, a harsh, ugly sound. "You think I'm scared of you? Just because you've latched on to Silas Thorne? You really think tricking me with fake pills and hiding behind him will save you? If you had given me the real medicine from the start, maybe I would have let you live. But now it's too late. Today you die." As soon as the words left his mouth, Serafina suddenly charged at me. I had no time to dodge. She slammed into me with all her strength, knocking me straight off the bank and into the churning, icy river below. The water swallowed me whole, the shock of the cold stealing my breath. As I struggled against the current, I heard Kaylin's voice from the shore, cold and final. "Alara can't swim. She's as good as dead now. We can finally rest easy." I heard Serafina's relieved exhale. "The current's so strong and she can't swim. She must have been swept away." "What if someone finds out?" my father asked, his voice uneasy. "Find out what?" Serafina said casually, her conscience already clear. "When we get home we'll just say she went missing. If they find her body, we'll claim she slipped and fell in. And if the fish eat her, well, it'll just be another missing person case. No matter what, Kaylin added, she won't be a problem anymore. We need to leave now, someone said urgently. At once, my mother and father rushed forward and pushed Kaylin's wheelchair, quickly wheeling him away. The four of them hurried back home, believing their problem was finally, permanently solved. What they didn't know was that the woman they had just drowned was not the same woman they had killed before. This time I had made sure learning to swim was the very first thing I did. I fought my way to the surface, gasping for air, and watched their retreating backs. Let them believe I was dead. It would make their eventual downfall so much sweeter. I pulled myself onto the opposite bank, shivering but alive, and headed into the town. I had a general to meet and a new life to claim. Dripping wet and shivering, I didn't go home. They thought I was dead, and I needed them to keep believing that. I went straight to the public baths, used a little of the money I had sewn into my coat lining to buy a simple dry dress from a market stall, and composed myself. I had an appointment with a general. When General Thorne's jeep arrived at our agreed-upon location, I was waiting, calm and collected, showing no sign of my recent brush with death. The soldier driving looked slightly surprised but said nothing, simply opening the door for me. We arrived at Silas Thorne's private residence on the military base, a spacious, orderly home that reflected its occupant. He was in his study, still in his wheelchair, maps and reports spread across a large desk. "You came," he said, not looking up from a document. "I keep my promises, General," I replied. He finally glanced up, his sharp eyes taking me in. "And I keep mine. You have one chance. What is your proposed treatment?" "Acupuncture," I said without hesitation. "And therapeutic massage. I would need to treat you daily. The process will take time and it will require your trust." He was silent for a long moment, weighing my words. "The best doctors in the capital said my condition is permanent. The nerves are too damaged." "The best doctors in the capital don't know my grandfather's techniques," I said, a quiet confidence in my voice that I felt for the first time. I was not the meek, bullied Alara anymore. I was my grandfather's heir. He studied me and I met his gaze without flinching. Finally he gave a single curt nod. "Proceed." And so I began. Every day I went to his home. The first few sessions were filled with a tense, skeptical silence. I worked meticulously, locating the precise points along his meridians, inserting the silver needles with a steady hand. I followed with massage, manipulating the muscles and stimulating circulation in his lifeless legs. I saw the exact moment his skepticism began to waver. It was a week in, a tiny, almost imperceptible flicker of movement in his left foot. His eyes shot open, wide with shock, staring at his foot as if it belonged to someone else. He said nothing. But the next day he was waiting for me, a new intensity in his gaze. Weeks turned into a month. The flickers became twitches, the twitches became deliberate movements. The atrophy in his muscles began to reverse under my constant care. The color returned to his skin. We rarely spoke during the treatments, but a silent understanding grew between us, a partnership built on a shared goal. Meanwhile, I heard whispers from the town. Serafina and Kaylin had gotten their marriage certificate. My parents had filed a missing person report for me. They were waiting for my body to be found so they could look for the money. They were buried in debt from Kaylin's borrowing and couldn't afford a wedding, so Serafina had moved into his quarters on the base, resentful but waiting for his miraculous recovery. She was forcing the miracle pills down his throat every day, counting down the 81 days. The day Silas Thorne took his first unaided step, he gripped the back of a chair, his knuckles white, his face a mask of fierce concentration and staggering disbelief. He looked at me and for the first time, I saw something raw and unguarded in his eyes. Not the stern general but a man given back a part of his soul. "How?" was all he could manage to say, his voice rough with emotion. "It was never the pills, Kaylin," I whispered, the truth slipping out to the wrong person for a moment before I could catch it. I shook my head, correcting myself. "It was never about a miracle cure, General. It was about waking up the pathways your body already has." He didn't miss my slip. "Kaylin, Captain Vance." I froze, but it was too late to take it back. It was around this time that Kaylin, having taken the last of his special pills, suffered his catastrophic collapse. The scream that echoed from their quarters was heard by half the base. I was at Silas's home when one of his aides brought him the report. Sir, there's been an incident with Captain Vance. It seems his condition has dramatically worsened. Complete loss of sexual function, severe muscular atrophy. His wife is demanding he be taken to the capital for specialists. Silas looked from the report to me, his expression unreadable. The pieces were clearly clicking together in his brilliant tactical mind. My sudden medical expertise, my slip of the tongue, Vance's simultaneous and mysterious decline. He didn't ask, but he knew. Make the arrangements for their transport to the capital, he ordered his aide. Then he turned to me. It seems your skills are in high demand. You will accompany me to the capital hospital tomorrow for my final evaluation. It wasn't a request. It was an order. And I knew it was also protection. He was keeping me close and he was putting me right in their path when they were at their most desperate and vulnerable. The next day we arrived at the prestigious Capital Hospital. Silas Thorne, walking with only a slight limp and the aid of a cane, was a sensation. Doctors and nurses whispered and stared, talking of a miracle. And then we saw them. Huddled in a hallway, looking defeated and frayed, were Serafina, my parents, and a shrunken, ashen Kalen, slumped in a wheelchair, a blanket over his lap hiding his shame. Their jaws dropped when they saw me, alive and well, walking beside the gloriously recovered General Thorne. They stared like they were seeing a ghost. "No way," Serafina muttered, her face pale. "No way. I was the one who pushed her into the river." She didn't even finish the sentence before my mother clapped a hand over her mouth. I stopped in front of them, Silas a solid, imposing presence at my side. You're okay?" my mother stammered, her voice shaking. "Sorry to disappoint you," I said coolly. "But I'm alive and well. You must have assumed I couldn't swim, which is why you pushed me into that river, right? Shame for you." I came back and made learning to swim the first thing on my list. "It was all a misunderstanding," my mother tried to explain, flustered. I narrowed my eyes, cutting her off. "So what brings you and your beloved daughter here today? Don't tell me you're trying to get treatment for Kalen Vance." Before she could answer, the squeak of wheelchair wheels sounded. Kalen emerged from a hospital room, struggling to push himself toward us. The moment his eyes landed on me, standing tall and healthy next to a walking Silas Thorne, his face collapsed into utter disbelief. No way. This can't be happening," he choked out. He looked from Silas's legs to mine, and then his eyes, burning with a feverish mix of rage and desperation, locked onto me. He gasped, his voice tight. "You switched the pills, didn't you?" I met his panic with a calm, mocking smile. "What do you think?" The hospital corridor seemed to shrink, the sterile white walls closing in on the scene of our tragic reunion. Kalen's accusation hung in the air, a desperate, choking thing. You switched the pills," he gasped again, his voice a raw scrape of betrayal and fury. I held his gaze, my expression one of cold amusement. "What do you think?" "It was you," he started, coughing violently, his rage making him tremble. "You gave my medicine to him." He pointed a shaking, accusatory finger at Silas Thorne. "That's why he can walk. You stole what was mine and gave it to him." I cut him off before his hysterics could draw more of a crowd. "Do you really think it still matters what you say now, Kalen? Do you want to know why you ended up like this? It's not because I gave your miracle pills to someone else." I leaned slightly forward, enunciating every word clearly. "It's because those pills never existed." "I don't believe you," Lucas shouted, spittle flying from his lips. "You're lying. If there were no miracle pills, then why could I walk in the last life? Why can he walk now?" "Because your recovery had nothing to do with the pills," I said, my voice dropping, becoming almost conversational, which made the truth even more devastating. "You're missing the most important detail." "What?" he demanded, his eyes wild. "What did I miss?" "You forgot me," I said softly, a small, bitter smile touching my lips. "Have you ever once considered that the reason either of you could walk wasn't the medicine but me?" "That's impossible," he muttered, but the first seed of doubt, terrifying and immense, was planted in his mind. Silas Thorne, who had been silently observing, finally spoke, his voice a low, authoritative rumble that commanded attention. "She's telling the truth. I didn't recover because I took some miracle cure. I can walk now because she treated me with acupuncture every single day. For hours." "Acupuncture." Kalen's eyes flickered and then a memory long ignored surfaced. The silver needles in the nightstand drawer in our past life. My offhand comment about them being for treating illness. He had never connected the dots, never seen me as anything more than a servant, a bearer of magical pills. The realization was a physical blow. His face went from ashen to a deathly gray. Then why? He asked, his voice breaking with a bitterness that tasted like ashes. Why did you lie and tell me there was a miracle pill? You really don't know? I replied, the coldness returning to my voice. You were willing to die for Serafina. You refused every attempt at treatment. I had no choice but to lie to you just to make you cooperate. I took a step closer, my eyes boring into his. I never imagined that you could be so heartless. After everything I did for you, after I saved you, cared for you, you repaid me with betrayal and murder. You're nothing but a soulless monster, a coward. Kalen's face turned a deeper shade of gray with every word. He was crumbling under the weight of his own mistakes, his own blindness. Isn't it because you were in love with me? He spat, a last pathetic attempt to salvage his ego. You forced Serafina to leave so you could take her place. You couldn't stand seeing us together. I laughed then, a cold, sharp sound that echoed in the hallway. You think I wanted you? Do you know why I married you? Serafina didn't want to. You were a cripple and she didn't want to waste her life on a man who couldn't walk. She already had another man on the side, so they forced me to take her place. That's not true. Kalen roared, but the roar was weak, desperate. Serafina isn't like that. Don't you dare slander her. Even now, at the end of everything, he was still defending her. His love for her was the chain that had bound him to this fate in both lifetimes. Believe whatever you want, I said calmly, turning away. It won't change the fact that you're a heartless, ungrateful monster. Even a tiger won't eat its own cubs, but you shoved me into a river while I was pregnant. You're worse than a beast. Kalen had no rebuttal. He had no way to fight back, no place to hide. He thought this was the lowest point of his suffering. But he was wrong. This was only the beginning. I gave a cold laugh and stared straight at him, delivering my final blow. Kalen Vance, I whispered, the name a curse on my lips. You're about to learn what true regret feels like. A loud thud rang out behind me as we walked away, followed by a nauseating stench. I didn't need to turn around to know. Kalen had lost control of his bowels right there in the hallway, his body and spirit utterly broken. The doctors in the capital confirmed the same diagnosis. There was no hope for his recovery. Humiliated, and Serafina and my parents had no choice but to bring Kalen home. The army, upon confirming his permanent and degrading disability, arranged for his discharge. He received a lump sum and a small monthly pension, and they were evicted from military housing. From the very first day they left the compound, Kalen's life turned into a living hell. Serafina's mask of devotion shattered completely. The woman he had killed for, the woman he had believed in through all my revelations, showed her true colors. She viewed him with utter revulsion. She abandoned him completely, leaving him to crawl around their filthy, small house. She went out every day to find other men, spending his disability pension on herself. He barely had food. One meal might come, the next wouldn't. He lived in his own filth, helpless and utterly alone. Whenever Serafina did come home, if she found the place smelling of his waste, she would fly into a rage and beat him. Slaps, kicks, even using a stick. As she beat him, she screamed, "You damn jinx. Good days never come my way. All the bad luck in the world just had to find me." Kalen cried out in pain, pleading, "Serafina, please. You can't treat me like this. We're in this together. I love you. You're the only one I care about. I'm just not able to walk right now, but I'll find a way. I'll stand again. I promise." He thought saying that might soften her heart. It only made things worse. "You still dreaming about walking?" she shouted, her voice shrill with contempt. "Keep dreaming. The doctors already said you're done for life. And you're a curse. You ruined my last life and now you're dragging me down in this one too. You've destroyed me twice. Do you even understand that?" Serafina had finally dropped the mask completely. She glared at him, her beautiful face twisted with pure hatred. "Back then I only hooked up with you because you recovered," she spat, the truth pouring out like poison. "I figured with your rank and connections I could climb up too. I didn't know you'd bring me nothing but death." Kalen trembled, the foundation of his entire world dissolving. You were using me all along?" She laughed, a harsh, ugly sound. "Does love put food on the table? Have you even looked at yourself in the mirror lately? You're disgusting. I must have done something awful in a past life to be cursed with you in too. She leaned in closer, her voice dropping to a vicious whisper. Back then I wasn't even supposed to die. But you couldn't make a damn decision. You dragged your feet and I had to fake a suicide to force you to break things off with her. I left a note and went to the river planning to pretend to jump in, but the bank collapsed beneath me and I actually fell in. It was your indecisiveness that killed me the first time. And you. Kaylin's voice cracked with a rage so profound it was silent. You knew the truth? About the note. Serafina gave him a crooked, merciless smile. Of course I did. What? You thought I was some innocent little princess? Snow White, please. Just thinking about it pisses me off. I thought I was destined for comfort and glory. But all I got was you. You ungrateful bastard. You deserve this. You can't walk because heaven finally gave you what you deserved. Kaylin never imagined that the woman he loved so deeply, the woman for whom he had committed murder, was capable of such venomous deceit. Overwhelmed with rage, horror, and utter disbelief, his body finally gave out. He fainted on the spot, lying in the squalor she had condemned him to. After that day Serafina stopped pretending altogether. Since they had already torn off all pretenses and he was now completely helpless, she no longer saw the need to hold back. For her own convenience, she began bringing her lovers home, parading them in front of him, the sounds of their intimacy piercing his soul each night. Lying on the floor helpless, Kaylin was forced to listen. Each moment was more unbearable than the last. He finally understood why fate had sent him back. It wasn't for redemption. It was for retribution. Because he had been too cruel, too shameless. This second chance wasn't a gift. It was his personal hell. He couldn't take it anymore. After a long period of silent, tortured planning, he finally spoke to Serafina. I don't want to go on like this, he said, his voice hollow. I'll let you go. We can get divorced. You really mean it? Serafina asked, her voice laced with suspicion but unable to hide the glimmer of hope. Of course, Kaylin replied, his tone flat, devoid of all emotion. Just invite your parents over so we can talk it through properly. We should do it properly as a family. Serafina, blinded by the prospect of freedom, didn't question it. She thought she was finally free of the millstone around her neck. What she didn't see was the dead look in Kaylin's eyes, the finality in his words. He had laid a trap and she was walking right into it. She called my parents, who arrived with a sense of grim relief. They too were tired of the burden, tired of the shame their beloved daughter was bringing upon them through her open affairs. A divorce, while scandalous, seemed like the only way out. Kaylin asked Serafina to prepare a nice meal, a last supper, to mark the end of their disastrous marriage. While she was busy in the kitchen, he managed to drag himself to the cupboard where they kept a bottle of cheap rice wine. With trembling, determined hands he crushed a powerful stash of sleeping drugs, left over from his earlier misery, into the bottle. They sat down to eat. Serafina and my parents, envisioning a future without the cripple in the corner, drank freely, toasting to new beginnings. Kaylin sipped his water, watching them with an unnerving calm. It didn't take long. The drugs were potent. First, my mother's head slumped onto the table. Then my father's eyes glazed over before he too collapsed. Serafina, feeling dizzy, tried to stand, her eyes wide with dawning horror as she looked at Kaylin. You, she slurred before her legs gave way and she crashed to the floor unconscious. Silence descended upon the small, squalid house. Kaylin looked at the three of them, the architects of his ruin. The vain, selfish wife and the parents who had nurtured her cruelty and sacrificed their other daughter for her comfort. He moved then with a purpose he hadn't shown in months. He dragged himself across the floor, locking the front door and bolting the windows shut. He took the remaining kerosene from the lamp and splashed it around the main room, over the furniture, over the unconscious forms of his wife and in-laws. He saved the last of it for himself. Striking a match, he looked around the room one last time, his face a mask of twisted peace. Then he dropped it. The flame caught with a soft whoosh, greedily consuming the kerosene-soaked room. Heat and light erupted, quickly followed by black, choking smoke. Kaylin didn't try to escape. He closed his eyes as the flames licked closer. The screams of the three others as they awoke to a fiery agony were the last sounds he heard. Their cries echoed under the moonlight, a horrific symphony of final, desperate regret, before being swallowed by the roar of the inferno. The fire lit up the night sky, drawing neighbors and eventually the fire brigade. But it was too late. The small wooden house was a charred shell by the time the flames were put out. Inside they found 4 bodies, burned beyond recognition, locked in a final tragic embrace. News of the deaths of Kaylin Vance, Serafina, and my parents reached me just as I was returning from the courthouse. I was not alone. Beside me was Silas Thorne, his hand resting gently on the small of my back. We had just registered our marriage. A junior officer, pale and solemn, approached Silas and delivered the report in a low voice. Silas listened, nodded dismissively and dismissed the man. He then turned to me, his gaze searching my face. "There's been a fire," he said, his voice neutral. "At the Vance residence. There were no survivors." I stopped walking, letting the news settle. I felt nothing. No sorrow, no grief, no triumph. Just a vast, empty silence. From the moment Serafina and my parents pushed me into that river, they had ceased to be my family. They were strangers who shared my blood, and the death of strangers has nothing to do with me. The second life, I was meant to live it well. I looked up at Silas, at the man who had seen my worth without me having to beg for it, who had offered me a partnership built on respect and truth, not lies and manipulation. "They chose their path," I said quietly, my voice steady. "It had nothing to do with me." Silas studied me for a long moment, then gave a slow, understanding nod. He didn't need the sordid details. He had pieced together enough from my skills, my fears, and the venom of the Vances. He took my hand, his grip firm and warm. "No," he agreed. "It doesn't." We turned away from the messenger and the news of the past and walked toward our home. The road ahead wouldn't always be easy, but it was mine. It was free of the shadows that had haunted my first life. It was clean. And with that alone, I was sure I could live a very, very happy life. The aftermath of the fire was a 9-day wonder in the town. The tragic end of the disgraced Captain Vance and his wife, along with her parents, was picked over with morbid fascination. The official story was a terrible accident, a knocked-over kerosene lamp, doors bolted shut from the inside, no chance of escape. Nobody looked too closely. Nobody mourned too deeply. They were a footnote, a cautionary tale about debt and despair. Their end was a closed chapter. My beginning was just opening. Life with Silas was nothing like my previous existence. It was built on a foundation of quiet understanding and mutual respect. He never pressed me for the full story of my past, though I knew his tactical mind had assembled a fairly accurate picture from the fragments I'd let slip and the things he'd witnessed. He had seen the fear in my eyes when Kaylin confronted us at the hospital, the cold satisfaction when I revealed the truth about the miracle pills. He knew I was capable of a ruthless calculus he understood all too well from the battlefield. One evening, months after the fire, we were sitting in his study. The silence was comfortable, broken only by the crackle of the fireplace and the scratch of his pen on official documents. I was reading one of Grandfather's old medical texts. "You never asked," I said, my voice soft, not looking up from the page. The scratching stopped. I felt his gaze on me. "Asked what?" he replied, his voice equally quiet. "How I knew," I said. "About the acupuncture. About Kaylin. About everything before it happened." He was silent for a moment. "I didn't need to ask. I saw the results. And I saw the look in your eyes when you spoke to him, a look that spoke of a long and terrible history." He put his pen down. "Some battles leave scars that aren't visible. I recognize them. I have them myself." I finally looked up, meeting his steady gaze. "It feels like a lifetime ago. Another person's life." "It was," he said simply. "This is your life now." And it was. I continued my work, not as a hidden practitioner but with his full support. Using the money I had taken from Kaylin, which felt like just payment for a life of servitude and a death unjustly delivered, I set up a small clinic. I started treating others, not just soldiers, but townspeople who had ailments the doctors couldn't fix. Word of the general's wife, the healer, began to spread. I was no longer Alara, the forgotten sister, the sacrificial lamb. I was Alara Thorne. I had a name that was my own, a purpose that was my own, and a partner who saw me as an equal. There were no dramatic declarations of love between Silas and me. Ours was not a passion built on fleeting emotion. It was something deeper, more durable. It was a bond forged in shared silence, in mutual respect for each other's strength and scars. It was the quiet comfort of reading together in the evenings, the unspoken understanding when a memory from my past would darken my mood, the steadying presence of his hand on mine. He was my sanctuary. And he often told me, was his miracle, not just for healing his legs but for bringing a warmth and purpose to his life that had been missing since his injury. Sometimes, in my dreams, I would still hear the rush of the river, feel the icy water closing over me. I would wake with a gasp, my heart pounding. But instead of the crushing loneliness of my past life, there was now a solid warmth beside me. Silas would wake instantly, a soldier's reflex, and without a word he would pull me closer, his presence an anchor in the storm of my memories. The nightmares came less and less frequently. One afternoon a young soldier was brought to my clinic. He had a severe injury to his leg from a training exercise, and the base surgeons feared amputation. His face was pale, his eyes wide with the terror of a 19-year-old staring at a shattered future. I cleaned the wound, my hands steady. I prepared my needles. As I worked, I spoke to him in a calm, low voice, just as I had to Silas, just as I had to Kaylin in another life. "This will help," I said, not as a plea but as a statement of fact. "It will take time. You must be patient and you must trust me." He looked at me, at the general's wife, and he nodded, desperation and a flicker of hope in his eyes. As I inserted the first needle, I felt a profound sense of peace. My grandfather's gift, which had been used as a tool for survival and then for revenge, was now finally being used for what it was always meant to be: a gift of healing. A gift of hope. I had walked through fire and water to get here. I had been betrayed, drowned, and reborn. I had served a life sentence in a family that didn't love me and married a man who deserved nothing but contempt. But that was all gone now. All the toxic people and ugliness were behind me. The road ahead was clear. I looked out the window of my clinic, seeing the sunlight dappling through the leaves. Silas was walking across the compound toward me, having finished his duties for the day. He looked up, saw me watching him, and a rare, genuine smile touched his lips. I smiled back. I had not just survived. I had not just gotten revenge. I had, against all odds, found my happy ending. The end.